Divorced people, what was the final straw? I had been in hospital the night before, and they had planned to do surgery for suspected appendicitis. It turned out not to be so acute, so the surgery was canceled, and I was discharged and instructed to rest. By that morning, I hadn't eaten for almost 2 days. Husband comes to the hospital to pick me up. He sat in the car about a block away with the engine, running, waiting for me to walk to where he was. He called his work to say he was taking the day off to look after me. In reality, he spent the day in bed or playing PC games. There was no food in the house, and he refused to go grocery shopping because that was my job. By now, I'm super hungry and still in pain from the niggling appendix. I asked if he could sort dinner for us. He pretty much picked a fight with me over that. I said I didn't need this in my life, and he responded, "Well, we could get a divorce if you want." I said, "Yes, please." I've actually been thinking about that for a while.
It sounds like a tough situation. You're in pain, just out of the hospital, and your husband isn't helping much. It's frustrating when someone won't step up, especially when you're not well. The whole divorce comment is intense, but maybe it shows how much he's not into dealing with things. It's a reality check when you realize you deserve better support, especially after something serious like surgery.
She cheated. I tried to make it work. She blew up at me one night 6 months later, threatening divorce because I was being friendly with a waitress at a bar. She was with me at the time. Wasn't being secretive or flirting. I took her up on the threat, told her I was done. Drove down to the bar after we got home, got the waitress's number, went to see my lawyer the next day, got papers filed, fucked the waitress, and we ended up in love and are happily married now, and far more happily married than I ever was before. Big shout out to my ex-wife for pushing me towards this wonderful woman.
That's quite a journey. It's interesting how things unfolded. It sounds like you made a choice that changed your life for the better. Sometimes, leaving a toxic situation opens doors to something good. Finding happiness after chaos is a powerful thing. Glad to hear you found someone you really connect with. It's a reminder that often, the end of one chapter leads to a much better one.
I mentioned it before. She found out I was going blind after 3 years of marriage, and that sort of broke what was left of a failing relationship. She was gone 3 months later. I had to stop driving and move to where I walked to work to stay employed. I moved into an empty apartment with a sleeping bag. I look back at that time and am pretty amazed I didn't lose my shit worse than I actually did.
It sounds like a rough time. Losing your sight is already tough, but then having to deal with a relationship falling apart on top of that is really hard. Moving into an empty apartment with just a sleeping bag must have felt isolating, but it's interesting to see how you managed to cope. Sometimes it's surprising how resilient you can be in tough situations. Glad you made it through.
I was at home with our newborn, and he didn't come home one weekend. He finally came home at about 3 a.m. on Monday and promptly passed out without saying anything. I checked his phone, I know, and there were pictures of his best friend's girlfriend on his phone. He claimed it was okay to spend time with her and get pictures from her because she and her boyfriend were swingers. He doesn't know that it's not how that works. In a moment of rage, I forwarded the pictures to his best friend. I found out they were not swingers when the guy got angry about the pictures and smashed the windshield of his girlfriend's car. I took the kids the next day and moved out.
That sounds rough. Dealing with trust issues can really hit hard, especially with a newborn around. It's wild how quickly things can spiral. Sending those pictures was a bold move, but I guess you were just done with all the lying. It's good you took the step to move out when you realized it wasn't working. Prioritizing your kids' well-being in that situation is important.
My first wife was from Mexico and couldn't really make the transition to the US. She was young, and so was I, so I tried everything, including telling her she could stay in Mexico to get her degree and I'd pay for it. Flash forward a couple of years later, we haven't talked in 2 months because of bullshit. I dislocated my shoulder at a fire and am at home after having it reduced, clinical term for fixed. I couldn't shower myself, so my mother has to help me clean up. It finally dawns on me that I'm a grown-ass man getting cleaned by his mother while my wife is oblivious to anything that's going on with me. I was done. I wish I'd done it sooner.
It's a tough situation to be in. That moment must have been a real eye-opener for you. Being in that vulnerable position and realizing your partner's absence must have felt pretty isolating. It's a lot to take in, especially when you expect support from your spouse. It's good you recognized it and chose to move on. Sometimes you just have to prioritize your own well-being.
When I did all the chores for us to have a relaxing weekend, I vacuumed the apartment, cleaned everything, did the bathroom, went grocery shopping, $250+, washed 2 loads of clothes and hung them to dry, new bed sheets, made dinner that was on the table when she got home. And all during the day, I sent her texts telling her what I did. Her reaction when she got home? Why haven't you done the dishes? Edit. Spelling.
That sounds pretty relatable. You put in all that effort, and then the focus shifts to one thing you missed. It's like you can't win sometimes. I had a friend who did something similar, went above and beyond for a party, and then got nitpicked over small details. It can be frustrating when all the hard work goes unnoticed. Guess that's just how life is sometimes.
Around 6 weeks after we got married, she asked me if it would be alright if she could go out with a guy from her new job, like a date. Her exact words. No, WTF. Divorce proceedings began within the week. She moved out, and within 8 months she remarried that guy, had a couple of kids, then divorced him. 8 years later, she finds me, now living in another state, wants to get back together as she said she was wrong, and I was the only guy she ever really loved. Nope, I was done. Now she's a Jesus freak, and completely foo in the head. Bipolar is my guess. I've had no contact with her in a long time, for my sanity.
That's a tough situation. It's wild to see how things played out. It sounds like you made the right choice for yourself. People can change a lot over the years, but it's clear you've moved on. Keeping distance seems wise, especially if it's affecting your mental well-being. Sometimes, letting go is the only way to find peace. Life moves on, and so do we.
When I returned from Afghanistan in 2012, I was not the same man I was when I had gone. I was completely broken, disillusioned, angry, and entitled. Completely selfish. The only thing I could focus on was myself. Society told me that was okay. I became abusive, verbally and emotionally. I twisted everything she said and made it her fault. I took every flaw of mine and applied it to her. I became, in a literal sense, sociopathic. The war had affected me so deeply that I had lost myself to it. So when she took the kids and left nothing but a note on the table, I started to take the hint and made the changes I needed to make. It was too late for our marriage, though. She is a good woman and is happily dating. I myself met an ex-Marine woman and are at the courting stage. The kids are happy, and I see them 3-4x a week. And I'm starting to get the man I was back. Divorce is tragic, but not always bad.
It's tough to hear how much the war changed you. A lot of people struggle with those kinds of demons after coming back. It's good that you recognized your behavior and are working on yourself. Being able to see your kids regularly sounds like a positive step. Starting over with someone new can be tricky, but maybe it gives you a chance to really build something healthier this time. It's all about moving forward, I guess.
When everything I did was being addicted. I'm not that much of a gamer type, but when I found a game I liked on PlayStation, 2 non-adjacent nights of playing a game I enjoyed was addicted to gaming, and resulted in a huge outburst how I don't give her enough time anymore. Meanwhile, she was so addicted to casual games on her phone that any conversation was more of a monologue where she was just annoyed about interruptions. There were many other similar things. It often revolved around me enjoying something and that becoming a problem. Eventually, I just realized she had some kind of an issue with me being happy doing things, and we called it. After we parted ways, a friend of mine told me my ex told everyone she ended it on her own, as I was interested in everything else but her. Right.
It's interesting how relationships can shift over something like hobbies. You enjoy a game, get labeled as addicted, while the other person is glued to their phone. It's like there's this unspoken rule that only one person can have fun. When it became clear that her happiness depended on me not enjoying things, it became a problem. It's kind of freeing to step away from that, though. Sometimes it's just better to move on.
My dad left a passive-aggressive note about not leaving a can of cat food in the fridge. My mom confronted him about the tone of the note. A fight ensued. Dad tried to escape to his man cave. Mom made the mistake of barging in to continue the fight while he was trying to calm down. Dad erupted in 25 years' worth of pent-up rage. A can of cat food. Edit. For anyone interested, my dad was certain that a can of cat food left in the fridge would make any other nearby food taste funny. Possible, I guess. Either way, my mom didn't think so, nor did I thinking back. So despite his repeated protests, she always put the cat food in the fridge. Finally, he left that fateful note. Edit 2. To those commenting about covering the cat food, I think it was hence my mom's protest that it didn't impact the surrounding food. Even with the cover, there was a smell. I do remember that much. Like all picky cats, ours at the time would only eat a certain brand. If I recall, the plastic covers we had for Whiskers tins didn't fit, so we used tinfoil, which I'm sure isn't as effective.
Sounds like a typical family moment. A note about cat food turned into a big deal. I guess the little things can pile up over time. Your dad's reaction makes sense when you hold stuff in for so long. It's funny how something so minor can trigger a blow-up. I can see your mom's side too, thinking it's just a can of cat food. Odd how these small things hit hard, though.
When my daughter asked me, "Mummy, why are you always sad?" I could put up with the emotional abuse, the isolation, the accusations of infidelity. I wasn't cheating, but had no sex drive because I had just recovered from cancer, and the belittling. But I couldn't hide it from my daughter, and she deserved better.
That's tough. Kids pick up on our feelings more than we realize. It's hard to balance personal struggles and being a parent. You want to protect them from your pain, but sometimes it shows. It sounds like you were dealing with a lot. Just being there for your daughter and being honest when you can is important. It takes strength to face such challenges. Hope you find some peace.
Going through a divorce now. I don't think there was really one thing. We moved to another country, and I think she kind of found herself. I was really into settling. We were just two ships drifting past each other at a really slow pace. She still lives here, and I help her. We left on good terms, thankfully. We both found it was best for us to be on our own and move on.
That's a tough spot to be in, but it sounds like you both handled it maturely. Moving to a new place can definitely change people and relationships. It's good you're still supportive even after separating. Sometimes distance is what people need to grow. It's nice that you left on good terms. That can make things easier. Just takes time to adjust and figure things out on your own.
For some reason, I decided to try and make it work after she cheated on me with several people while I was away. Long story why. And after a fight over her desire to remain friends with one of those people, she told me that she was scared of settling for me. I made the decision for her, and now she's back to her old ways, but that's none of my business anymore.
It sounds like you went through a tough time. Trying to make things work after being cheated on is complicated. It's interesting how sometimes you think you can change things, but people often revert to their old habits. It's good that you've decided to step back. Focus on what you want moving forward. That's really all you can control now.
She called off work and followed me to a restaurant where I was going to hang out with my friends after I got off work because she thought I was cheating on her. I wasn't. After waiting like 30 minutes and seeing nothing, she finally came to talk to me, told me to just admit it, and if I admitted it, she would too. So she admitted she cheated on me. I had nothing to admit. Put the final nail in the coffin of an already terrible marriage.
That sounds rough. It's strange how trust can break down like that. You think you're having a good time with friends, but then someone you care about shows up with doubts. It must have been a mix of confusion and frustration. Relationships can be complicated, and sometimes honesty brings out the ugly truth. It's sad when things end like that, but it sounds like you were already on different paths.
We'd finished a session with a marriage counselor where my ex-husband was all charming and contrite and loving. And on the elevator ride down, he switched back to his usual angry, controlling, and verbally abusive self. One face to the public and the true one to me. That was the final straw.
It's tough when someone puts on a facade. You think they're one way, but behind closed doors, it's different. I've seen friends go through similar situations, acting all fine in public but struggling privately. Sometimes, it takes a wake-up call to see the truth. It's important to know when to walk away for your own peace. Choosing yourself is key, even when it's hard.
Money. When I married her, we both worked. I got a raise at my job, and she quit hers. For the next 2 years, I kept pestering her to get a job, to clean, to do anything so I didn't feel like I did everything. One day, she decided we needed to go out for dinner. I decided that I couldn't afford it, and she asked me if she wasn't worth a nice meal. I told her no. Then, after a moment of her staring at me in shock, informed her that she needed to find a way to get back to her mom's house in VA.
That sounds tough. Money can really change the dynamics in a relationship. It's hard when expectations aren't met. I guess it highlights the importance of communication. She thought she deserved a nice dinner, and you felt the burden of providing. Sometimes people just need to talk things out instead of jumping to conclusions. Not saying it would have fixed everything, but it might have helped.
She told me she was seeing her sick father in the hospital, lung and brain cancer. She fabricated the whole trip, called me from her uncle's place telling me she missed me and loved me, etc. She was actually a few miles down the road partying with some dudes, I don't know. I found out when her mother called looking for her. Her father wasn't even in the hospital that week. I had divorce papers ready by the time she showed back up. Her father succumbed to the cancer 6 months later.
That sounds really rough. It's hard when people let you down like that, especially during such a serious time. Trust is important, and it seems like she made a pretty big mistake. You never really know what someone is capable of until something like this happens. It's good you were prepared for the worst after finding out, even if it's a tough situation to go through.
I realized that she wasn't ever going to be happy with me as her partner. The best way I could make her happy again was to end it, which, while painful beyond description for me, brought a relief. She and I are both happier now, and she shines when she smiles again. We stay in amicable contact. Maybe one day in the future we will find each other again, or maybe in another life, or maybe that's just a comforting thought when reflecting on someone you love. For me, the final straw was knowing that I wouldn't be happiness as a partner in her life.
It's tough when you realize someone isn't finding happiness with you. Ending things can bring a strange sense of relief, even if it hurts. It's good that you both found a way to stay in touch and that she's happier now. That idea of maybe reconnecting someday is nice, even if it feels distant. Sometimes, making that tough choice is what's best for both people involved.
When I realized she was more in love with her negative dramas and the associated pain and suffering than she was with me, that she had been choosing to prioritize her drama and sadness over me, being anhedonic and unavailable to enjoy life, because she was too busy being caught up in all sorts of BS negativity, which evidently for her was much more exciting than boring old happiness/enjoyment. So we split up, had a reasonably amicable divorce. I'm still paying $50 per MO dog support, no kids, and went our separate ways. 5 years later, I sold my biz, moved to Hawaii, and am living with an amazing woman who's pregnant with our first kid. We find the ups and laughter in every day. It sounds like a dumb platitude, but if you call a happy life dumb, well, let's not meet. Smile.
It's wild how some people thrive on their own drama. I had a friend like that, always caught up in her issues, ignoring the good stuff around her. Eventually, we drifted apart. Years later, I found a new path, enjoying simpler moments with someone who appreciates joy. It's funny how life changes, and what seemed tough back then led to something way better now. Happiness definitely beats any kind of toxic drama.
He quit his job a month after we bought a house. Sat around for a war playing video games and doing nothing around the house while I was working 70-hour weeks. What finally made me leave was when I went on a business trip. He picked me up at the airport without showering or brushing his teeth in a stained wife beater, complaining about how hungry he was because I wasn't there to cook for him. The house was destroyed. He didn't do anything at all while I was gone. 3 weeks later, I left him.
That sounds rough. It's frustrating when you put in all the work and your partner doesn't step up. Living in a messy house and dealing with that kind of attitude must have felt really draining. You made the right call to prioritize your well-being. Sometimes, leaving is the only way to move forward. Good for you for taking that step.
Came home from work one day to find the house empty. Her and her boyfriend of 6 months I didn't know about moved everything out one day while I was at work. I'm 23 years old, work 2 jobs, and put her and our kids in a $175,000 house so she could cheat on me. According to her, our relationship was toxic. That gave her the justification to cheat. Shit happens, right?
That's a rough situation. You work hard to provide, and then find out everything's changed without warning. It's tough to accept someone just left like that. It can feel pretty lonely going through something like this. It sounds like you'll have to pick yourself up and figure things out. Just remember, things can turn around with time.
I'm not divorced, but I have a funny breakup story that I want to share anyway. The final straw of our 1-year-plus relationship was the fate of a shitty coffee grinder that I had bought used for $5. When I moved to a different state, I gave it to a friend of mine who liked coffee. Weeks later, she complained to me that I should have given it to her friend who also likes coffee, and who I don't know, and that in fact I should get it back from my friend and give it to her friend. I thought this was beyond ridiculous, and this escalated to a gigantic fight that ended in breakup. The relationship was shit by that point anyway, so it was bound to happen. But I still think it's funny that a year-long relationship ended over a $5 coffee grinder.
That's a wild story. It's funny how small things can blow up in relationships. I had a similar situation with a friend who got mad over a pizza topping. We both realized it was just about the topping and not really about the friendship. Sometimes those little things highlight bigger issues. In your case, it's the coffee grinder that took the fall. Just goes to show how trivial stuff can lead to big drama.
On my birthday, I came home from work and found the kids, my van, and most of my worldly possessions gone. Also, she had put on the Christmas lights and left all the doors open and lights on as a final fuck you. She ran off with her boyfriend, whom she eventually married. She is a certified borderline personality that came out at the custody battle. I eventually won custody of my 2 small children, raised them to adults, put them through college, and yes, they're doing quite well.
That's a tough situation to come home to. It's wild how quickly everything can change. It sounds like you had to pick up the pieces and focus on the kids. Raising them well and getting them through college shows a lot of strength. It's good to hear they're doing all right now. Life has its ups and downs, but you managed to turn it around.
In another couple, I worked with a husband. We're at a casual work function, sipping drinks, and just generally shooting the shit. And it somehow came up that I'd had a vasectomy. They had 3 children, and the wife, sort of but not really jokingly, said she wanted her husband to get snipped. He turned to her and said, "No fucking way. What if I end up dumping your fat ass and wanted to start a new family with my second wife?" This happened in 1999. They're still married as far as I know.
That's a classic moment. It's funny how certain conversations just stay with you. The way he reacted was so blunt. You could tell he was serious but also kind of joking. It's interesting to see how relationships handle those kinds of discussions. I wonder if they've ever laughed about it since, or if it still gets brought up during family chats. Time really changes perspectives on those moments.
Oh man, I'm sorry. My dad tells the story of when he found out my mom was cheating and they were in marriage counseling to decide if things could be salvaged. She directly said that she wanted to stay married, but she had to keep seeing her boyfriend too. She just had to. She couldn't live without him. The counselor looked at my dad and said, "We're done here. Get the divorce. There's absolutely nothing I can do."
That's a tough situation. Your dad had to deal with a lot there. It's wild how sometimes the truth comes out in such a blunt way. Makes you think about relationships and trust. It's hard to fix things when one person isn't fully committed. In the end, it sounds like the counselor recognized that the path forward was pretty clear. Life moves on, I guess.
Been through a similar situation, and why best friend stole a guy I was dating. TBH from that day, I haven't thought about him. I knew it was her wrongdoing because the guy was a noob with no guts to do something like that. I was pissed off at her for doing it even when she knew I had strong feelings for him and she knew how deep my self-esteem problems were. She also tried to justify herself with others by making up crap about me. She wants to be friends with me now, but I can't even look at her. She hurt me so much.
That's a tough spot to be in. It's hard when a close friend crosses that line, especially when they know your feelings. You think you can trust them, but then they go and do something like that. It's understandable to feel upset and want distance. Sometimes, it's better to step back and focus on yourself rather than force a friendship that's been damaged. Trust takes time to rebuild, if it ever happens.
This one made me particularly sad. That scene in the movie always makes me cry, as she's listening to Joni Mitchell alone in her room. I hope you've moved on to someone better, who makes you feel like the only person in the world. My parents have been apart, separated when I was 1, divorce finalized when I was 4, for more than 25 years, and they are both much better people without each other.
It's tough when you see someone in a vulnerable moment like that. It reminds you of how important it is to find the right person who really values you. I can relate to your story. My parents went through a similar situation. They weren't happy together, and being apart changed everything for them. Sometimes separation is necessary for growth, even if it's hard at first.
It's not as simple as that. 24/7 with another person is bound to create some fissures and bad routines, both in terms of life choices and argument resolution, are easy to fall into when most of the things about your life are a redundant, albeit necessary grind. People aren't born with the tools to handle long-term relationships. They have to learn them, and it's mostly done on the job.
Yeah, living with someone can be tough. You're always in each other's space, and things can get pretty repetitive. It's easy to slip into bad habits and not know how to fix problems when they arise. Most of us have to figure it out as we go. Relationships can teach you a lot, but it's not always straightforward. It takes work and patience to really make it work over time.
My wife and I are still together, and we're working positively through some issues. However, I agree that being a little older may have helped. Also, don't take baggage into a marriage and expect marriage to fix it. My wife was depressed and has trust issues and thought they would disappear once we got married. Wrong.
It's good to hear you and your wife are working through things together. Relationships can be tough, and age sometimes brings a bit more perspective. It's true that personal issues don't just vanish with marriage. It takes effort from both sides to support one another and grow. Facing those challenges together can strengthen your bond over time. Just gotta be patient and keep working on it.
For me, we just weren't a good match. It just took us a while to figure it out. 2.5 years of dating and 2.5 years of marriage. We were fighting about stupid shit a lot, and I realized his version of what he wanted in a wife was not something I could give him. Think Stepford wife. I think we got married mainly because it was the next step in our relationship. We were just doing what we were expected to do after being together for so long, and neither of us wanted to be alone. After a while, we realized that neither of us was happy and that we needed to part ways. We are both in a much better place now with spouses that are a much better fit for each of us.
It's interesting how relationships can go that way. Sometimes you just follow the script of what you're supposed to do. I guess after a while, you start to see the cracks and realize it's not really what you want. Ending things can be tough, but it sounds like you both found what works for you now. It's good to hear you're both in better situations.
It's funny how on the surface it's just, she ate your pizza, and some people might think, so what? But the intent of the action speaks volumes. She cared more about her satisfaction than yours. When two people love each other and make sacrifices for each other, it's self-sustaining. Both want what's best for the other, so they both do well. This, on the other hand, was one-sided.
It's interesting how little actions reveal a lot about someone. Like that moment when a friend takes your pizza, thinking only of themselves. It shows a lack of care. In strong relationships, both people should prioritize each other. But when it's one-sided, it feels off. That kind of behavior can make you rethink things. Noticing these small details can say a lot about where you stand with someone.
I dated a girl in college whose parents got divorced over similar circumstances. He ate the last cream puff. She had explicitly stated that she wanted that cream puff and asked him not to eat it. My understanding is he popped it into his mouth right in front of her. It's not about the cream puff or the pizza. It's the realization that you can't count on them for even the smallest kindness. My wife and I got into a huge fight over the good pillow once. Thankfully, one of us realized we could just buy another good pillow and get rid of the shitty pillows. Saved our marriage.
It's interesting how small things can blow up into bigger issues. The cream puff incident really shows how little actions can have big consequences. I've had my share of silly fights too, like over whose turn it was to pick the movie. It always helps to remember that communication matters more than the actual argument. Sometimes, just getting past the little stuff can save a lot of hassle down the road.
There's an Eminem song with the line, they say every man grows up to marry his own mother. I'm honestly kind of scared of that happening to me. My mom is a constant talker. I mean constant. And I know that it's annoying and I don't like it. But there's this one girl I like, and she's pretty much a constant talker too. Odd thing is, I don't find it as annoying, but I'm scared that one day I'll find it so. I know your situation is much more traumatizing than mine. Anyways, sorry for the dumb rant. Good luck with your life.
It's interesting how that works, right? You notice traits in your mom and then connect them to someone you like. It's kind of a weird cycle. I get why you're worried. It's all about perception, I guess. Sometimes things that annoy us in one person aren't as bothersome in another. Just see how it goes. Life's a mix of surprises, and who knows what you'll end up appreciating in the end.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.